Hi, welcome to another problem solving session of Understanding Ethnography by Professor Nina Sabnani. And since we do not have any participants yet, and we might just expect some of them to be joining in maybe a few minutes or maybe not. So we will just start off with where we left in the last problem solving session. In the last session, um, we majorly discussed about a lot of things of uh, gaining access to your field. Now, when you are an ethnographic researcher, you majorly are interested to know about your participants, as we have seen all through the last um, weeks, 4 and 5 weeks now, because the fifth week has also been uploaded. So now when you go through all of the videos and all of the tutorials, majorly videos, and the reading stuff, if you get some chance, you will majorly find that everything and anything related to ethnography talks about majorly the participants and the field. So now, when we talk about gaining access in the field, that is of utmost importance, because once you are in the field, you are majorly concerned with how do you get to talk to the participants, right? Because that is why you are there in the field in the first place, to conduct your study. So when you are majorly focused and interested to know about a certain section of the society, we are primarily taking examples of artisans or you know creative minority communities, or like you just say tribal communities, or maybe communities whose voices haven't been heard yet, because this is a design course primarily. So that's why we are majorly concerned about that. So the examples would eventually revolve around them, and how the other ethnographers, basically how Nina ma'am had done her ethnographic researches, and how her colleagues had done their ethnographies. So there majorly you'll find that we are trying to find out about communities whose voices haven't been heard yet, or who needs a better representation when it comes to having their issues and crafts and art proliferated. So that is where we are majorly talking about in this module, and obviously in this course altogether. So when we talk about gaining access, it is very important that we think of what the participants want from us also, because majorly when we talk about doing ethnographic research, you as a researcher are the one who is actually benefited from the process, and participants have literally nothing to do, apart from the example of that very real Elvin, where he actually had interacted with had a sort of a complete membership. We'll come to what membership is. So had a sort of a complete involvement in the issues and practices and the activities of of their participant, basically. So where they're actually trying to understand every aspect of the, basically, the central tribe of India, that is the Gonds. So he just you know tries to first understand everything, then uh, move to that level of comfort with the participants, that they're actually able to raise their concerns and share everything openly with the researcher. And then the researcher is uh, taking up another role of trying to do away with the issues of their participants. That is one thing that is of immense um, that of immense praiseworthy that is. And then again, that is commendable, because you won't generally find researchers getting into that depth of something. And even if they go to that depth, they might not be able to do anything about those things, right? Majorly when we talk about ethnography, we are always of that sense that we are here to understand the phenomena, right? And not find major solutions to it. You can, of course, find solutions, as I've said in the last three problems three problem solving sessions as well. You can find solutions to them. You can think of coming to a closure, but generally things like these do not have a closure, right? It's always that you're going from one addressing the issue level to understanding the issue level, right? So if not of the very relevant case, the researcher is generally not somebody who can benefit the participants in some sense. So it's very important to think how participants you know are, how they behave, how they think, how they feel when you're there with them in the field, right? So let's just start with where we had left in the last week. So yeah, we were here about gaining familiarity, and when you talk about familiarity, it is something that actually would want to do when we are in a setting, or basically when we are there in um, you know in the process of um going to the field, talking to the participants. So, as like I already said, you have to have some sense of how things work, because if you're going to a field without having some prior knowledge about what you are going to get, it becomes something of a very like a huge surprise to you, and that should not happen. You should have some sort of knowledge about what you're going to get, with respect to participants, with respect to the space that you're going in, and with some sort of environment that you'll be facing, having there, right? So that is important. In that sense, what you have to do is gain familiarity, right? So, how do you gain familiarity in a field? Um, Obviously, you have some knowledge, which I said is important, but then it's always the case that you will get like a lot of new concepts there, new things there to see, new relationships to discover, new environments, and everything like that. So when we talk about gaining familiarity, it is that you are there in the field and you spend time. Number one is that you spend a lot of time in the field with the participants primarily. Even if you are there, you are making sure that you're spending a lot of time with the participants while you are there in the field, right? Then hanging around. So what happens is, when you first reach your participants, they tend to be quite, skeptical about what you are going to do actually there. Why are you so interested in them? And again, would they would why would they want to answer to your questions, things like that. So in that sense, building that informal relationship with your participants is of immense importance. And when you when you don't hang around with people, you do not get to know them personally, or informally, when we say that. uh, Primarily when we say hanging around, it comes to a mind that we generally hang around with friends, or with people we know. But here what we are trying to do in our research is trying to befriend our participants, right? So in some sense it is that. And also, when we talk about ethnography, we had in the last three sessions talked a lot about how important are those little pieces of information, little pieces of knowledge that participants give you just informally while you're talking to them. And those things are the major part of your research, right? You are not majorly concerned about facts, about any formal information about the community, about the people that you are interviewing and researching about. You are majorly interested about how they live, how they talk about certain topics, uh, how important or integral certain relationships are there in their lives, or and also how they perform certain tasks. So those things, when it comes to craftsmanship and things like that. So there, unless you do not build a mutual, informal, and a very warm relationship with your participants, it becomes very difficult to get out any information from your participants, right? So again, and how would you hang around? Like, you'll share common spaces with them, you might eventually end up living with the participants for a few days. It happens a lot that the researchers ask the participants, like, not not very specifically about a certain participant, but a household. So if you're interested in knowing about a tribal community in Rajasthan, then you might just go and live with the one family there for like a certain number of weeks or maybe months. That depends on how much welcomed you are there, right? You will come to participants consent as well, but yeah, when you are there in the field, you wish to gain familiarity, you have to have to share some common spaces. Not every time you live with the participants, but you might be just like there with them in their workspace, in their working area, in markets or anywhere, like whichever place you find important to be studied, right? So you share those common places. Then obviously, as I said, chatting informally is very important because in formal interviews you get a prepared version of your participant, right? And you do not want that. When you are there to study about every aspect of your participant, it is important that you think um, about them very personally. You talk to them in a way that they feel comfortable in, and something in some sense that they are open to answer your questions, and they are open to discuss their issues with you, right? Finally, these things can occur on some common topics, right? Where you'd actually want to know their opinions about, you'd actually want to grasp some knowledge from them. So these common topics are a very nice way of you know doing it. You starting off with your first conversation, or not only the first, but keeping that flow all through, right? So when we do that, we are advised to be a certain form of a researcher, which is a professional researcher. Now, again, when we talk about a professional researcher, that doesn't mean that you have to, wear a formal dress and move to them, and talk to them in a very formal language or things like that. A professional researcher, when ethnographers suggest that one should be professional in their behavior while they are in the field, it means that the uh, researcher basically has to be professional in the sense of understanding what their participants want, right? They have to be committed to learning from participants. First thing is that, because you are in the field for a certain purpose, and that purpose has to be fulfilled, right? In that sense, You cannot just go about and just spending time relentlessly here and there, but you have to be very specific about how you need to spend time in different places, talking to different people, observing different phenomena and things like that. So you have to be very committed about uh, you know about the purpose of your research. Then you need to maintain certain principles like respecting the confidentiality and privacy of the participants. So, not just these two, respecting the confidentiality and privacy is obviously one thing that you have to you have to be very careful about. But when we talk about being a professional researcher, it is also of following the protocol. So you have to have a consent form signed and from your participants, and also have a certain um, uh, what do we say, a certain legal method that you have to follow um, to conduct a research that invasive in nature. So in that sense, that professionalism and how to portray yourself in the field, and also how to have a sense of um, sense of the field, basically sense of how things would happen one after the other. So in that sense, uh, thinking a lot about your participants is one thing that makes you a professional researcher. Then making sure that none of your actions and none of your not just actions, your equipments, if you're taking any, and behavior or anything uh, has any sort of negative impact on the participant, right? And Right. So, in that sense, it is important that you maintain that professionalism, and you follow all the legal and moral, ethical norms while doing your research. Now, how do we do it? First thing is that we keep it neat, simple self presentation, a clear, comfortable communication, awareness of social codes, and a learning, an interest in the learning that you need to portray, and willingness to share. So, the first thing that we have here is a very neat, simple self presentation, right? So, what happens is, once you are in the field, it's not that just you are observing your participants, it's also a lot about your participants observing you, right? It's never a one-sided thing in ethnography. You are so much into the context, you are so much into your participants behavior, lives, and uh, all of that everyday routine. So it is also vice versa, where the participants are actually observing you as a person. So for once, like when you come to them and ask for a sort of a permission in which you, so that you can actually study every aspect of their lives and or their work or anything that you're interested in, then that sense of you, the researcher being somebody from outside, is always there, right? So in that sense, the participants always try to find out and screen you through their lens in order to find out if you are that person to whom they should actually talk comfortably with, right? Yeah, because without having that sense of a screening of if I should actually share my deep thoughts with this person or not, or so many details of my life, of my work with this person or not, is always there. And unless they find you safe enough to share everything, they wouldn't. So in that sense, uh, a very neat, simple self presentation is important, because that will, show you as somebody authentic, and with somebody they can be comfortable with, right? Communicating everything clearly will also, build your rapport with them. Building of rapport eventually would mean that you build a certain relationship with your um participants, such that you do not like that such that the participants do not have to think much while responding to you and your questions, right? So that rapport building has to be there, because otherwise you won't get to the actual realities uh, of their lives. So in that sense, a very open, clear, and what would I say, sort of convincing communication has to be there, um, so that the participants can actually trust you as a researcher, right? Again, the awareness of social codes. So uh, as I had said in the last problem solving session, and even in the one before that, you have to be quite aware about what social codes your certain community that you're trying to, understand about, that you're trying to research about, follows. So these codes, if they are there in a certain community and you do not have an idea about them, you might be, not be very first open to the researcher, sorry, basically the participants. Secondly, the participants won't be open to you that much, and just in case you violate any social codes that the particular community has, then it becomes, a sense of, what do we say, a sense of alienation comes into the participants at that point of time. They would not be very comfortable talking to you. They might not be very open about how things work, how they, feel about certain topics. They will have, masked opinions. Masked opinions here, I mean that they will wear a mask of what might, just feel that they're authentic about their answers, but they won't be. They would actually give you answers that are, generic, um, very vague, and also that those can be something that they might be giving to actually impress you, or uh, with respect to how you would like them to answer. So in all that sense, social codes are very important to be, uh, um, to be dug into and also unraveled. These social codes, and like I had already said, sometimes create problems as if you do not know them, because like there is one example. If you go to the week go through the week 3 videos, you'll find that there is one example that talks about how a researcher is invited to a dinner by the participants, and just like a family of the community she wants to study about. And what happens is, she's very excited, because from that point of time she has to, start off with her study, and at this point she is quite sure that she'll be building a good she has to build a good rapport with the family and with the community, so that she is, welcomed every time she comes there. So what happens is, once they're done eating, the researcher tries and puts her, used plate to the sink by herself, which some people like us would mean that it is a sort of a courtesy. When we go to somebody's place, it would be nice that we keep our plates in the sink by ourselves. But that community actually found out very rude, because they thought that that was a direct, invasion into their personal space, like the kitchen. They would not want the researcher to just go and you know move to any part of the house, like just like that. So in that sense, um, you have to be very sure that you do not, you know violate any social codes. uh, if you do by any chance, then you should be you know quite ready to face certain backlash or certain uh, negative aspect in your research. But then there are ways to uh, overcome that as well. You might just try and communicate that you weren't aware about the social codes, and then you'll try to learn more about them and spend more time, and then eventually you'll find about it. So those things you can manage. After that, an interest in learning is very important, because if you're not interested into what your participants' lives is all about, or you're not interested into, talking to the participants in general about certain things, and you're not interested in maybe listening to what your participants, talk about, then it is very difficult to have that sense of, professionalism, basically. And yeah, fine. And finally, the willingness to share is something that you should have, because uh, if you if you ask questions to your participants will also ask questions to you, right? But exactly for that point, which says that if you are there to study your participants might also want to study you, right? And majorly because, so that they find it that you are the right person, they can be sharing private information with, or some uh, detailed description about their work or something like that, of their art or their craft. So in that sense, you have to be open to share a bit about yourself as well, so that they feel comfortable talking to you. And also, this sharing of information should always be like truthful, no masking. So, as I just said, participants are just as observant and curious about us as we are about them. And as we learn about them, they learn about us and formulate their analysis just as we do, right? So, um that analysis, obviously, they have in their head, which they won't, just reveal to you. But uh, you have to be, equally open um, to answering questions, their questions. And you cannot just keep asking your questions and ignore or dodge their questions when it comes to you know having that conversation with them. So in that sense, you have to be very mindful about things like these, and sharing about ourselves. But like, obviously, it's given that if you're there in the field, you and your participants ask you about something, or would want to know about you more, you always can have some boundaries. You can you wouldn't just want to tell everything about you, and that's fine, that's completely all right. But just that, you shouldn't be barring the participants from entering your space. That is what we try to mean here. But this actually helps you first, makes us comprehensible, because yes, if you as much you share with them, the more they're able to understand you, then it builds trust. As I said before, nobody would want to just share their information with somebody they have no idea about. So that trust building process requires you to share your background, your personality, your work, your research, with them, right? Then creates reciprocity. Again, if you talk to them, you give them answers to their questions, they give you answers to your questions. So it's give and take thing, and then opens up a dialogue. So sometimes what happens in an ethnographic research is like uh, participants are there, to and very open to answer your questions, but they have like no idea where to start. So they'll start the first thing that one would think about when they would want to start a dialogue is that just let me tell me about you. So the first thing obviously when somebody would ask you is about yourself. So in that sense, the creation of that dialogue and starting off a conversation is always occurs through the introduction of the researcher. So participants would like to start off um, with, oh, I got to know that you're doing a research, and you'd want to know about us, but why would you want to know about us, and where are you from, and like what's your name, where do you belong to, and why is this study important to you, uh, how can we help you. So all these questions will start off with your introduction. So that is important, again, sharing about ourselves. So now when you talk about this building of trust and building of familiarity with your participants, there are various ways in which you can do it. It's not just that having conversation is the only way you can build trust and familiarity with your participants. You can use certain tools. So there's an example you'll come across in the week 4, which talks about Sarah Pink. She is an ethnographer, and she is majorly interested to learn about people in Spain, right? So majorly her work has been in the Spanish region. So what happened is that before she could just start off with her research, uh, she just goes to the field with a camera in hand, and with equipments. So what happens is that she starts taking pictures of all the objects there, and of the party. So whenever we go to the field, we're not just only concerned about the participants, but what all objects they're using in their everyday life, what um, tools, or what instruments they use, and these things that we call like objects and artifacts, primarily in research we call them artifacts. These also convey a very nuanced meaning of the field, right? So here she was just taking pictures, and you know making sure that nobody has a no participant has a problem with it. Then she started taking pictures of the participants, as we all do while we go to the field. uh, but then that became a sense of how she interacted with her participants. So what happened is she yeah what happened is she made it very a sort of a activity in which she could actually start a conversation with different people of that community. She started taking pictures and giving those so giving those pictures to the participants so that they have a certain sort of a token or a memory with them. So all that things matter when you are in the field, and that particular activity of taking pictures not just benefited the um researcher in herself, but also the participants. So they were very interested to, come and, pose for the pictures and get their portraits. So that is one thing. But it's not that that she the pictures that she captured was just to, build up that rapport, build up that relationship with the participants. When she took these pictures and she observed how different people reacted and posed differently for a picture, she could actually capture those nuances of their personalities. She could, while taking pictures, have some conversation with them that why did they, choose a certain pose, or why would they want pictures to be to like their pictures to be clicked. So all of these things she used as a medium to interact with the participants, and that again, worked as a tool for building trust. So some people also do it with making hand drawings. So they paint their participants, they sketch their participants and things like that, and then eventually give their works to the participants. And obviously they're happy about all of this, and helps in building, some sort of relationship with the researcher. So but eventually, what happens, that the major thing that we have in mind when it comes to, building that relationship with your participants, is that of immersion. So immersion is a concept in which it says that to immerse oneself in the context means to, one, become a member of a participant community. So we'll come to a lot, different types of how researchers can participate all through. But before that, this concept of immersion tells you that when you're in the field and doing an ethnographic research, you're set to immerse yourself in the context, right? So immersion, when like the literal meaning that we go with, is that you are, there, you exist there all the time. You are within that, you have mixed yourself within that particular context, right? uh, in that sense, so when we say becoming a member of the participant community, it should be of a sense that you're, you might look different to somebody, but it shouldn't be that evident, right? You should be that comfortable and that what do I even say, comfortable and mixed up into that context of your participants, such that it is difficult for anybody else to, say that no, you don't belong here. So in that sense, the immersion of the researcher in the context is important. Then it means to absorb and inculcate behaviors that are common in the community. So becoming a member eventually will give you that, will actually, ask you to be absorbing all of that context in yourself, and then to, take up certain behaviors, or maybe some ways of living while you're there with the community. um, and then you'd start behaving in the similar manner when you're there for a longer period of time. So all of these things will actually affect you as a person as well. In that sense, this immersion and, you know becoming somebody from that community will actually be possible only when you spend a considerable amount of time uh, in the context. And finally, it means to to be an insider as well an outsider in the community. Now, uh, as I already said, how much you would try to delve into that community and you know be like become one of them. It is also important that you own your identity, which like you had before coming to them. So you have to be very open and clear about when you'd start with being that insider and when you'll be the outsider, right? So as we have already discussed that sometimes participants are not very comfortable uh, getting the researcher into certain contexts, so into certain spaces of theirs, so, like for example the kitchen or maybe uh, anywhere in the workplace. So then you have to be very mindful that if the participant is comfortable, then you're actually an insider. You are there to their surrounding, in their environment, and you actually behave similarly as they do. And while they would not really want to be in a certain context, then you just stay out and observe things happen, right? So this immersion is obviously getting submerged into that context, into that environment of the community. But then also it shouldn't you shouldn't lose your identity, because number one, there is this possibility of the researcher giving a biased um, finding of it out of its research, which is really not what we sought, what we seek. And fine, and also you know keeping your identity will allow you to have that rational thoughts in your head, so that you'll be actually able to articulate things with respect to how it will look like in your research, and um, that will help you document what you have observed in the field. So this insider outsider proportions have to be maintained by you, and that depends on researcher to researcher how they want to do it. But that outsider, being an outsider of the community, is really important, so that you do not generate biases in your findings, right? Now, there are three levels in which you can immerse yourself in the field. First is complete membership, then is active membership, and another is peripheral membership. So complete membership is that what I was talking about, that you are there in the field, you actually live with people there, you are uh, we like spending the whole day with them, you're observing each and every aspect of their lives, you're observing every activity of their work, of their daily routine, of how they walk, how they go to their um, you know supermarkets, or maybe places where they buy and sell stuff. um, so all of that comes under complete membership. The example of that of were you relevant that I was giving you was one an example of complete membership, because that sort of immersion where it would actually lead to resolving of a certain issue of the community can only be done when you know so much, or you live with the people of the community, right? So yeah, active membership is there is a little bit sort of smaller immersion technique, in which the researcher is there, doesn't follow it doesn't follow a very deep immersion phenomena, but it would have some sort of, I would say, element of it, because in an active membership, the researcher might not be like living with them, participants, or spending like the whole day together, but they will have a lot of uh, you know a lot of time together. They will be spending a lot of time together, but that might uh, be just limited to a certain number of hours. So, like for example, if you are uh, you know understanding, or let's just build on the last problem solving sessions example. And if you're actually trying to understand the workspace and the work life of idol makers, then you are there just in the workshop area the of those craft persons, and not at their homes. Uh, you might just stay there while they are working. So maybe if they come to their workshop at early morning, and then just leave about before it gets dark, then you're there with them, talking to them, observing their their gestures, their uh, hand movements, their little elements that they do while working. So you will observe all of that, and then you will actually sort of uh, or document it, right? And finally, if you just want to have a certain sense of certain phenomena in a community at certain periods of time, like for example, you just want to as I had uh, taken that example, you just want to uh, study the course of work of these idol makers during the month of Ganesh Chaturthi, then you will be just there for that certain period of time in their workspace, and might you might just limit your study to observation and a few interviews. So that is sort of a peripheral membership, where you're majorly on the boundary and not into the um context exactly. So all of these levels basically of membership, or degrees of membership and immersion, will you will have to choose while you're in the field. So it is not that you have to take up that membership for the whole of your study. It can happen that initially, before you do not build a very um, you know warm relationship with your participants, you might sort of have a peripheral membership, and then you like move to active and complete ones. So that can happen. Otherwise also, it what happens is you might have multiple research questions, and then you want to answer them differently. So in that sense, you might want to like answer one of the research questions through peripheral membership, and then answer the other one through active. So that can also be done. So as you go from peripheral to complete, you go much deeper into the immersion, right? So ethnographic encounters are always a blend of distant observation and intimate participation. This mix informs a primary way of learning. So uh, basically, what we say is that you cannot just conduct a whole ethnographic research by just observing people and communities from a distance, because then you'll not get answers to why a certain phenomena is happening, right? uh, and intimate participation is there, but obviously it's not that you'll always be in the context and you will always get answers to to all of your questions, right? So some answers you'll only get with observation, and that is, if done through a distance without interruption, can sometimes yield very nice results. So what happens is, it might happen that you are there with a community of painters, and that that community requires a lot of concentration while they work. So in that sense, you might not want to just go there and interrupt their work. You might just want to stay and observe how they do, um, apart from like taking interviews and asking questions. So uh, a correct mix of this with respect to your research. So there is no standard correct amount of distant observation and intimate participation that you can say that, yeah, this much, like 20% distant observation is important, 80% intimate participation is important. That can majorly depend on what your research questions are and what you would want to study, right? Okay. Before Okay, before we move to today's, the week five, that we might majorly want to discuss this in this session. I would just say that if once you go through this problem solving session, but if you find any problems through the week, through this session, through the previous three sessions of mine, just come to the next session, which will be on next Monday, 7 to 9 p.m. And you can discuss any of your queries or anything with me. Also, you can just ask your questions, send in your questions, or and I'll be there to answer. So um, just go through everything, go through the week's videos, and then come up with your questions. Yeah, so talking about questions, we will be we will, while doing an ethnographic research and thinking about a lot of how to build familiarity, how to gain trust, and how to immerse yourself in the field. Certain questions are there that you need to ask yourself. So first is, are we building these relationships only for the sake of our research? So many a times what happens is, the researcher, which is not very professional, I would say, would build try to build a relationship for that particular study, and then think that after this study there's literally no point of me keeping in touch with my participants, right? That is somewhat true, but again, it happens a lot that once a researcher is there in the field and they build certain relationships, they would keep those relationships with them for a longer time, for much longer. So even if you are building these relationships just for the sake of your study, these might this might reflect in your questions, in the way you immerse yourself in the field. Because if you are not truthful about your relationship with the participants, and you would just want to have a give and take sort of a relationship with them, then that will eventually affect your research, because then the participants will be able to understand what do you want from them, and they'll like give you uh, pre-planned, prepared answers, and no truths will actually come out. So then, are these relationships professional or personal? These can be both to you, but just make sure that you get an actual, authentic self of yourself into the research, into your study, so that you're sure which areas should have the professional part of yours and which areas should have the personal part of yours. And finally, are they instrumental or mutually rewarding? So sometimes these this process of building relationships might mean that it is just it's just your benefit and not your participants. So you have to make sure that it shouldn't look like it's just instrumental, and should be to some sense, in any sort of sense, can it be a mutually rewarding thing, then you should generally go to that side, right? And what do participants gain from contributing the knowledge and narratives to our project? So again, as I said, mainly you are the researcher who's getting benefited from their answers and from the uh, study that you do. They are actually so much actively participating in your study, but they do not gain much from what they from the amount of time that they give you, from the amount of effort that they might have to go through if you're staying with them or things like that. So in that sense, uh, there should be some sort, you should at least think that there should be some sort of gains that they might get from your study or research. So that can be as little as they getting addressed, their issues getting addressed, their art or craft getting familiarity, or majorly becoming famous or things like that, so that their business can proliferate. So these things are something that you should be asking yourself. And when I talk about asking questions to yourself, then it comes self reflexivity, because once you spend a lot of time in the field, you will be coming up with a lot of details and lot of you know uh, information with yourself, and it is very difficult to comprehend and make meaning out of all this information that you've got from the field. It becomes overwhelming. Then what to do? Then what we suggest as researchers is that whenever you are back from the field, um, just come and sit down and think about what all happened during the day. How did people respond to you? Were there any challenges that you face? What challenges did you face? And then if there were any, then um, how could you do away with those things tomorrow, or maybe the next time you visit them? So in that sense, this will eventually filter all the things that you don't need from the research, and then refine your research or your procedure of doing your field study, or maybe participant conversation into something that will be, very beneficial for you, right? Um, Self reflexivity also includes that assessing yourself, asking yourself that if you actually want to, take up this project and spend that considerable amount of time and efforts into this. And after that, uh, like for example, when you're taking field notes, or you're jotting something down into your notebook, or taking pictures, or making videos, or just recording, or audio recording your participants conversation, then you sometimes come back and listen to those, see those, read those, to find out nuances which you might have like missed while you were in the field observing a lot of things altogether. Then you just come back, and you might come across something very interesting which you might have just not been able to observe while you were in the field. So, and also uh, you might want to find out about a certain practice that you saw today, and you next time you'd want to go and ask why, the meaning of it, that why would the community do such a practice in their day-to-day lives. So there, and these things actually also help you understand what all parts of the field and the participants is important to your research and which are not, right? So this ethics rigor, uh, with respect to how much you should converse with the participants. Are they actually welcoming enough, or are you, getting control of their personal spaces or anything like that? All of this you can only think when you are self-assessing yourself, and also self-reflecting. So that is very important to do. The ethics that are involved with respect to uh, you know going to the participants, going to their context, to their environment, recording their context and environment, uh, then it is very important to do a few things. First is like taking informed consent from participants. Informed consent means that while you first go to the participants to seek their permission that I'm a researcher, I'm here to document your day-to-day activities, and also I'm a researcher, I would want to know this aspect about your life and things like that, then you have to have a document, a proper set of statements in your hand, which will actually be given to the participant, and they will sign it, and give you a written consent that it's fine with them that you're here as a researcher, conducting a study for so institute or maybe for yourself, and that they are comfortable giving you their answers, or you doing research on their community. So those written consent forms are basically there, that researchers basically put forward before they start off with their study with the participants. The participants might choose to accept it. They might just sign and give you the required permission, or they have the full authority to reject your consent form as well, in which they would not want you to conduct this study in certain ways. They might not want to either uh, participate in the study at all, or they might just want to participate in the study in some aspects and not all of them. So it is okay if your participants are not very comfortable about sharing something, then you should not persuade them in any sense. The participants hold full rights and responsibility to deny you of documenting their lives. So that is there. First thing is the consent from the participants, informed consent. Also, this informed consent means that if you are making a form, consent form for the participants to fill, it is important and it is very necessary that you translate this informed consent form into a language that is comprehensible by the participants. Otherwise, what happens if you take a consent form in English and your participants do not understand English well, they might just sign and give it to you, or which is again wrong with respect to the research ethics. Or they might just not sign it because they cannot understand anything. So in both of these cases, you have to make sure that you take the informed consent form maybe in the uh, language that your participants understand, and also if in that if they do not understand certain points, you actually have to give them the whole idea of what you are going to ask them, or maybe collect data, analyze data, or what the study is all about. All of these things have to be communicated very transparently to your participants. Next thing that your participants may seek is anonymizing them in your writings, right? So what happens, like when you're a researcher, you will get your paper published after this ethnographic study, right? So what happens is, and then also you might also go to different places talking about your research and talking about the community with whom you worked. So in that sense, not all communities are very open to get um that sense of recognition. So then you have to decide that uh, how will you anonymize your participants, right? So if your participants are not okay and open with sharing their names, their identities, their pictures, their videos or anything like that, then you have to make sure that you do not first anonymize their names, which you can do by using pseudonyms, like that are just another names, fake names given to your participants, so that their identities do not get um, public. And apart from that, like for pictures, what we do is, if the participant does not want the pictures to be circulated or used in your research, then we just put a black sort of uh, box kind of a thing in those pictures at your eyes, at the participant eyes. So what they do is, like, if this is a picture, then this portion, the covering the eyes, has to be either blurred or put a black stripe onto, or you can blur faces of your participants who want them to be anonymized. So that is where the important part comes in. Anonymity is, again, as I told you, anonymity means that the participants wouldn't want you to take pictures of them or maybe reveal their identity. So if that is the case, then do not take pictures, use pseudonyms instead of their actual names. So that is what I said. Anonymity will come when you change your participants' actual names in your writings to something else. So that is one way of restoring their identities. And then you do not disclose any specific details such as phone numbers, addresses, place of work, etc. So these specific details of very, I wouldn't say specific, but very personal details such as phone numbers, addresses, and place of work. These things, generally many people do not want to be shared in the public domain, because uh, every citizen, every person, participant has a right to privacy. So these things should never be disclosed, I would say, to anybody, not even in your study, unless it's very, very important to give some context or reference. So, also, this can be done only when you have the participant consent, right? Okay, so I have a few quick questions for you to answer. So to immerse ourselves in the field, in the context, means to be an insider as well as an outsider in the community, which we just talked about before. That it is important that you stay inside the context and also observe it as somebody foreign, so that you may, find and also ask questions to phenomena that you are observing. So yes, obviously this is true. You need to have both the roles, that of insider as well as an outsider. Finally, for this week 4, this is the final question, which says that you need to match it. So complete membership is there, active membership is there, and peripheral membership is there. So let's just talk about the method. So marginal involvement, where the researcher, though welcome, is more an observer than a participant. So which actually means that the marginal involvement is means the very limited access to the participant, which might come under, what do we say, peripheral membership. So then the researcher participates in all the activities of the community just as any other member involved, right? So this can be sort of, right, what we say, um complete membership, because what else is there? Because everything, if the researcher is doing everything just same as the community, then he or she is completely involved in that scenario and the context. So that comes as a complete membership. And the researcher is considered a part of the community but is not involved in all activities. So co- considering the researcher as a part of a community would translate the researcher into an active membership. And yeah, not involving in all activities with respect to how comfortable the participants are, then the active membership still stays. So we have complete membership as B, so 1B and 2C and 3A. So we have option C as the correct option, right? Excuse me. Now we come on to week 5. Uh, if you have gone through the week 5, you would see that all through the week we have been majorly talking about the methods of intervention in ethnographic research. So the two methods that we are majorly talking about is observation and interviews. So here the main thing that we will be focusing on throughout the week is the observation. So what goes on in the field has to be assessed, or what we say, focused on to, and you know um, addressed and documented. So observation is one way of doing it. To observe is to be alert, to actively engage with what we are looking at, and to try and make sense of it. So now, when we when you go through the lectures, you will see that when the introduction of the concept of observation is done, it says that observation is very different with respect to what seeking and looking is, right? So seeking and looking are considered to be quite what we say, um, quite generic concepts which say that you're just there to see what is happening, right? Seeing, looking, and seeking. So in that sense, you are there in the context, you see what all is happening, but you don't put much thinking into it, right? But in observation is not just limited to watching or looking around, or you know or just making note of what is happening. Observation is in itself means that you look around, actively engage is the main word that we see, and making sense is the another main word of this um, line. So actively engaging and making sense are the two things that observation is all about, right? So like for example, let's say that you are taking that same example of idol makers. So you are there to observe their workspace. So you go there, you see what tables are there for the artists to work on, what mud, or what type of sand they are using to make the idols, what shapes they are giving to the idols, what colors they are using, what those colors are made of. Are they made of rock? Are they made of stone? Or are they, some sustainable sort of colors that have come? Are they made of flowers or something like that? So that is all observation. That is all. You're trying to get the sense of the field, but only making note of how people are doing it and what they are doing is not observation. You observe that all of this is happening, but then you are trying to understand why certain things are happening that way, right? So if you are actually seeing that a very special, sort of clay or sand is used to make those idols, you you are there and you know uh, thinking about why it should be, it is the case, or it should be the case. Then you find out that once the uh, you know once the craft person puts that sand or that mud into a certain shape, it stays in that shape. Then you understand that they've been using all of this because it is easy to use that, so that the idol doesn't fall down in that sense, or just stays in place when they are making them. So, and that the cast is of what we say, uh, of a strong stature. So in that sense, uh, all you are observing a certain phenomena, but on this at the same time you are trying to understand why that certain phenomena is happening. So that is what, when we say it is an observation. um, but why do we do an observation? So it, now we have all known that ethnography is basically going to the context, going to the environment of your participants, going to the participants, talking to them and things like that. But why would you need, while doing an ethnographic research, why would you need to do an observation at all? Maybe you can use another methods. So it says that where why would we observe certain things is that when the participants and the researchers speak different languages, right? uh, in that sense, uh, first thing that we had talked, I think we had talked in the week 2 uh, about this, where we were talking that the researcher shouldn't be like an alienated individual to the participant, and for that reason you have to either have some knowledge about the language that your participants speak, and if that is not the case, if that is not possible, then you need to have somebody in your team who can interact with the participants well. So when we say that the observation is very important when the participants and researchers speak different languages, so what happens is the question answer concept, questioning and answering concept stays a bit, you know, uh, like inefficient when it comes to uh, this scenario of participants and the researchers using different languages or speaking different languages. And then the non-verbal cues of the participants are the major aspects that the ethnographers or the researchers can majorly seek knowledge from, right? When the participant feels uncomfortable articulating their ideas in words, like when carrying out an activity. So this is something that happens a lot. What and like for example, when I uh, ask you to maybe just tell me a recipe of how you make pasta, then you might just give me a set of written or maybe verbal steps in which I can make pasta, but um, that will not include everything that you do while you make pasta, right? Because you have one made it formal set of rules and procedures for me to follow. Another thing is, there are a lot of things we do unconsciously or maybe semi-consciously, um, and those things we do not consider while we articulate things. So like Nina ma'am gives an example that if I ask you to explain the process of tying your shoelaces, then it would be very difficult because you know how to do it but you don't know how to explain it, right? So there are many phenomena in this world that are done just like that, but cannot be explained with proper language or proper set of words, because that is difficult to articulate. Finally, observation allows us to see details and particularities instead of generalizations. Now, as I said that those particular observation is not just that you making note of everything what is happening around you. It is majorly how you are focused on certain details of what is going on, right? So as I said that why the certain ideal maker is using that certain type of sand or mud is important, because you are interested to know that you are there to see how that how participants think while they work, so that those attention to detail things are important for you to consider when you're doing observations, and not just generalizations, as I said. um, yeah. And okay, I just got disconnected. um, yeah. So uh, okay, if we go through the next slide, it says what to observe. Now, as we just said that there are a lot of phenomena that are going on when you are in the field. There are a lot of things, there are a lot of participants in the first place whom you are interested to know about. So what all you will cover when you are trying to observe. So you so majorly there can be two ways in which you would try to bifurcate what you want to observe. First thing is observing a specialized activity like embroidery, pottery, or cooking. Now the example that we have of this is like the course that Nina ma'am gives is that she was interested to understand the process of bhil paintings, right? So bhil is a community, majorly tribal community, uh, which makes very intricate paintings, and they use a certain type of techniques while they paint. So what they do, they make this very tiny dots in their paintings. So that these paintings are made up of only those dots. So this sort of a very intricate, art. She'd want to capture the essence of it. So that specialized activity, which we are talking about, um, requires a lot of attention to detail, like I already said. So this observation is the main key method that you can employ while you're trying to understand that phenomena, right? You can obviously ask questions to people about that, but unless you get a sense of what all is happening, um, it's it's there in the context, because you cannot, as I said, cannot explain everything. You might talk to people, but they might not be able to explain you why they are putting certain color of dots in a certain location in the painting, right? So then that becomes important to just observe silently and try to comprehend the meaning out of it, right? Other thing that is important when you observe is that you might one want to just understand a certain specialized activity that you're trying to observe. Another thing is that you might not want to observe a specialized activity, but would want to understand something in general. So in that sense, the activity might not be specialized, but the behavior of the people doing that activity might be specialized for you majorly. um, you might want to understand that, like, for example, while we were talking about this idol making business, because there are a lot of communities that are performing this business of making idols during Ganesh Chaturthi and things. So in that sense, they are not very, a very limited section of people who we want to address or who we want to find out about. But the processes that they follow, the I would say perception of how they make idols is very different for every community, even if they follow the same uh, occupation. So in that sense, observing less specialized activities, even like shopping or driving uh, behavior, where you need to observe the small actions and decisions that make up a larger journey. In that sense, you might not want to, focus majorly or observe majorly uh, you know, the skill, the activity of the participants, but you'd want to capture or, understand how they are doing it, why they are doing it, because that how you perform a certain task tells a lot about your personality, right? So in that sense, you might be just focusing more on less specialized activities as well, such that you get to know about their behavioral aspects. Now there are different types of observations as well. First is participant observation. Next is non-participant observation, generalized and focused. So majorly the first two are two opposite kinds of observation, and the last two are also two opposite kinds of observations. So um, clear enough from their terms is that participant observation is something that uh, allows the researcher to directly participate in the process of the everyday life of the people. um, it's that if we take it in that sense that the researcher is supposed to become a participant of that context that they are observing, right? So like when we're talking about the Bhil community, and Nina ma'am actually going to the community and trying to understand their art, she actually tries to make paintings with them in while she's doing her research. So she for a lot of days she would go and sit with the uh, uh, painters and make paintings herself, so that the sense of the concept of immersion, as we just discussed, so that sort of complete immersion uh, can be made some analogy. We can make some analogy with respect to complete immersion here when we talk about participant observation. So that type of observation where you are observing everything while you are doing that same thing in the particular context is participant observation. Non-participant observation is something that makes you observe things from a distance. You wouldn't be making, like, in if we take the same example, if Nina ma'am wouldn't have wouldn't have started painting with the artists and with the painters, and would have just seen how they are doing it without asking any questions, obviously, then that would have been a sort of non-participant observation. Obviously there are certain level of advantages and disadvantages of all these types of observations, but we'll discuss that later. Um Non-participant observation, again, you can get a lot of sense of how people are actually feeling while they are doing their work, or how does their body language work, how does their hands work, how do their hands work while they are working. um, what level of skill do they have in themselves. So all these things are quite important, and you get a very nice sense of them while you're doing a non-participant observation as well. uh, but obviously the nuances that you get while you're actually participating into that system is immense. That is very different when we talk about it. Yeah, but the sort of a generalized observation that we are talking about is, yeah, that you go to the certain context, and first, to just get the essence of the field, you tend to focus your attention to a lot of different details, which might or might not be very applicable or relevant to your research. So, or also you might be just exploring what all you can get out from that field, from your sample of participants. So that is where the generalized ethnography might come into play. So sorry, generalized observation might come into play. So in that sense, generalized observation is one thing, but when we talk about observing particularities and making meaning out of them, then this generalized comes to the more focused form of observation. Focused observation is obviously where you are majorly focused on just one aspect of your participants, maybe you know routine or skill or anything. So like, for example, let's differentiate generalized and focused here. So like, for example, you are you know you want to understand how the females of the Gond tribes actually make food, or like what food connotes to them while they're in the kitchen. And since women are the ones who actually feed the family and things like that, so in that sense, you want to know about it, right? So you go to the context, you go to them, ask, you just ask for their consent that I'd want to do a research, and then you just one fine day start observing what they all do inside the kitchen, right? um, for the few days you are actually understanding every aspect of what they are doing throughout they're preparing food for their family, right? So you see them washing vegetables, preparing them to be cut, to be peeled, and then after that making them into a whole meal. So you're observing everything, but as you are observing them every day, you find out that there's a certain sort of different grains that they are using while they are making their food. So um, you just go and see that, like, out of the 10 days that you observe them, 5 days they've used that same grain, and the other 5 days they were different grains they have used. So those kind of observations where you're now trying to focus more on a certain aspect of the whole picture, then that becomes sort of a focused observation. And then you actually see that of that particular, when they're using that particular grain, how do they process it, how do they grind it, how do they use it, how do they make a dough out of it and then make rotis out of it and things like that. So then you're more focused onto a particular aspect of the whole phenomena. So then that the sense of focused observation comes in. Yeah, which, as I already said, we can shift between these forms of observation as we go about fieldwork, because yeah, in any of these concepts that we're actually talking about, right, in the ethnographic research space or research space in general, there are no hard lines that differentiate these types, right? There is no black and white concept of being of a participant observation and non-participant observation, or a generalized observation and a focused observation. Many a times these things somewhat overlap with each other, right? You can sometimes have a participant focused observation and a non participant generalized observation, right? So these things can also happen. And apart from that, everything, like in a given example, that examples that I give you, or examples that there are in the videos, right? Also those types of examples are where, when we talk about, like, if we're giving an example of participant observation, it is something in that example that participant observation dominates the other forms of observations. It's not that that this type of this example is only of participant observation, right? So things like that happen in research, and there are no black and white or hard boundaries that separate different types of different things in ethnographic research. So uh, also when these are very faint lines and everything overlaps everything, then moving from one type of observation to the next is also a very easy flowing process, right? You can actually go from, by, like, for example, if you are just you have just entered the field, you cannot just start doing a participant observation, because the your participants might not be very comfortable with you, just coming and doing their job with them, right? So it might appear to be very sort of an invasive kind of a thing to them, so you cannot do that. So first you'll start with the, like, sort of a non-participant observation and a generalized observation until your research question falls into place, right? Then when you have spent sort of a considerable time in the field, then you find out that okay, now the people are actually very comfortable with me. Now I can go and participate with them in the activities that they are doing, and then I would majorly want to know about, like, this particular aspect of their uh, what would I say, particular aspect of their uh, like occupation, of their work, of their household activity, or anything like that. So yeah, but now when we come on to the fundamental concepts of how, like, we have seen that what is observation, how do we observe, what do we observe, and things like that, and the different types of observation. We are actually looking at what actually observing means. So first is being alert to imponderabilia. Now, if you remember, in the first week we have this concept of imponderabilia, which says that uh, a researcher, an ethnographic researcher, is there in the field to observe, like, everyday happenings of their participants, right? They are there to assess, or maybe to go through, to make meaning out of the everyday routine of their participants. So um, now, being alert to each of the aspect of what is the usual happening of the day, that we call it, is important while observing. So first, when we say that, you can do it in a form of generic observation that you can do, generalized observation that you can do of the imponderabilia, that is also true to some sense. And next is being attentive to context. Now, when we say that being attentive and alert, it says that you're doing an observation, because you're not just casually going through and looking around things. You're actually trying to recognize patterns, try to find out about uh, how things are going in, and just that. with the aim or with the goal of understanding their meaning, right? So being attentive to context means that you have to be very cautious, and you have to be very careful about what is all happening in the field, because that might be something that you'd want to um, include in your research, right? So this something sort of being attentive to the context says that uh, everything that is happening in that particular context, which you might feel is different and which you might feel might have some underlying meanings to it, then you are actually noting them down and maybe asking about that to the participants later. uh, but again, now when we see that there are a lot of things that uh, we have asked you to, as a researcher, consider while observing, there is one question in mind, that where do we stop? There are a lot of things that uh, you have asked us to, like, observe, and what all, like, how do we know that what are the major aspects to be observed? So um, majorly the things that you'd be interested while doing an ethnographic research is that it would be very interesting to know the space. Space is exactly the environment that you are present while you're doing your ethnographic research. So that is the field basically. So that, what is the physical space like? So if you're in the workspace of artisans of a certain community, or maybe of craft persons or anybody, then how does that physical space look like, right? You have to observe that into detail. Why is that why that particular space looks the way it does, right? Then actors, who all are involved. Then actors are basically the participants here that we are talking about. So are those participants who are, like, involved in the process of making something, like, for example, as we said, that if we are like observing a workspace, then who all are the people involved? So this might include craft persons, this might include junior craft persons, this might include some laborers, and a lot of different people in the same space, right? So you have to see that who all people are involved. Um then the activities, what are they doing? So you'll find sometimes you'll find a clear division of labor between people like, you have a separate sort of activities for every designation, right? In that sense, you can find, sometimes it's not that the activities are clearly laid down, so for every person to perform. In that sense, you have to see that if they are doing certain things, so if there are certain activities that all of them are doing, and if there are certain activities that only a certain section is doing. So, like, for example, when we are observing a workspace, and we find out that the upper caste workers of the workspace are not doing certain aspects, right? So in that sense, these activities are important. Again, objects, what objects are present? So as I already said, there is this concept of understanding and studying the artifacts of the field as well. Artifacts are actually objects only which hold meaning in your research. So like, the if you see that in the example of covered storytellers, the covered paintings that they have done on wooden casts was actually something very important, because they actually tell you a story. The paintings that they've made are stories in themselves. So those things are very important when we want to see that what the Kavadias want to explain through them. uh, Similarly, when we talk about of bheel painters, there paints, and their brushes might be very intricate and might be very important to their context. Next, we come on to acts. So, what are the individuals doing? When we say that activities and acts, there are somewhat similar, but activities can be, more defined, and acts can be somewhat like anything abstract. They can be um, something that they might be just doing. So like in activities you might be observing that how they are making certain designs, while acts you can be just observing that how they are gesturing their juniors. So that those can be the differences that we can see through all of these. Next, the events, what kind of event it is. There are, so a context or a environment or a field is a very happening place. Every like a lot of things keep happening simultaneously, and you have to be very keen and open eyed when it comes to observing these things. So there can be certain events that might happen during your observation. So it can be that you might go to study the crafts persons in during a time when they have their festivals. So in that uh, aspect, the event, what is happening is very important. Then time, what is the sequence of events. Now as we already know, time is a lot of it's like a very important thing to consider when we are doing an ethnographic study, because every the context changes with respect to time. Everything changes, the meanings change with respect to time. So um, in that sense, what is the sequence of events? So if we say that like while making a coward, there's a certain procedure that they follow, and it happens always in a sequence. So in that sense you have to find out that why is that happening. Can a particular instance of a sequence not happen before another sequence, another event in that sense, or why is it happening in that particular sequence? So you have to also observe that. Goals, goals are very important to know, because eventually all of this that is happening in your context and in your environment is very important to be understood. So and there are always certain objectives and goals in mind of the you know artists or designers, or majorly laborers as well sometimes, of doing a certain task in a certain way. So like for example, when we're talking about covered storytellers here, then why are they actually uh, making that particular paintings? What does that give them? If they are actually not making a profit out of it, so that they can run their households, then why are they doing it in the first place? So those things are something that you have to observe and take into consideration. Finally, the feelings, what is the mood of the group and of the individuals. Uh, Not just the this physical behavioral aspect, but you have to also see the emotional aspects of your participants as well. You have to see when, like, if you find that your participants are getting frustrated over a certain event, then why does that frustrate them? Or if like for example, you're observing the idol makers, and during the peak time of Ganesh Chaturthi you find that they are so overworked that they get frustrated out of all the process, and they just uh, can't finish their work at the time that they had decided initially. Like why during the peak hours they might to work for longer. So in that sense you see that they might be very frustrated about it. So you need to take note of those certain types of feelings as well. uh, yeah, so as you were talking about where to limit, but since this is a whole lot of a list to observe, so how would you be able to, you know, observe all of this all together? So this is one big question that is always there in research, and with right in front of ethnographic researchers, that these are, you know, almost nine things that you have to observe, and these will be happening simultaneously. It's not that you will be uh, observing these things differently on different days or at different points of time. You will be actually observing them all together and then making, you know, documenting them of what you have found out. So where would one limit? Because it becomes a lot overwhelming when we are actually, you know, doing an observation sometimes. um, so it says that observe phenomena which constitute the everyday life of participants, events and rituals we are interested in learning about. So basically, when we say that we have a research question in mind, we already have, you know, narrowed down to what we actually want to learn from the context and from the space that we are in, right? We have actually, you know, identified the important areas that we'd want to, you know, describe about and study about. So then it says that you go to the context, understand the everyday life of your participants, but to the extent that you find interesting, right? It shouldn't be that you are actually observing everything, even if that might not make sense to you, because what we have taken up before is that a thick description isn't the one that we seek. We seek a a thin description is something that we don't seek. A thick description is something that we seek, and thick description involves going deeper into a context and, you know, finding out meanings out of it, underlying meanings out of it. So that is one thing that you have to keep in mind, that you have to be interested into learning about the participants, the events and the rituals and everything that they do. uh, and then observe the events and activities that help us understand our participants perspectives of their world, right? So, one thing is that you're narrowing down to a certain, you know, part of their life. You're not actually, you know, making out a whole story out of their whole lives, right? So you're actually interested in certain part of their lives, and that you are limiting yourself to. But when it comes to understanding the participants, then they're the perspective of them with respect to a lot of different um, you know, the topics or areas might be helpful and interesting to you, right? So in that sense, these perspectives, wherever you get the chance to observe through any of the, you know, points like these, you should consider observing that majorly. The major emphasis should be on the participant's perspective, right? Because that's why you're there in the field. And finally, reveal meanings that people attach to a phenomenon. So as I said, a thin description would mean that every you would cover a lot of multiple things, and then you would, you know, I would observe a lot of multiple things and then give little descriptions about them. That is not required, but the deeper meanings that are underlying to certain phenomena or to certain, you know, practices, those are important. And if these observations that you're doing reveal those, then you do it. Otherwise, you might just want to like skip that. Uh, okay. Now, one form of observation that we have seen above is participant observation. Uh, I think I'll just give you the introduction to participant observation, because there are a few more concepts before we can end the week 5. So I will give a major gist of participant observation. We can take up that in the next a problem solving session as well, because participant observation is something that is going to be a major concept here, and you that needs to be um, explained and discussed in detail, so that you guys do not have any sort of problems with respect to this concept. So we can discuss that again in the next class as well, but I'll just give you a major introduction to it. So participant observation, as we had already discussed it, some sort of it previously in the previous problem solving sessions as well, but this sort of you know um observation, or this type of observation that we have seen, is one of the types of observations. It says that it is a method of learning in which we participate in the everyday and occasional activities of the phenomena that we want to study, right? So, um, as I said, this a lot of you can a lot of researchers and a lot of thinkers uh, associate participant observation with emotion as well. So because this is somewhat very similar meaning when it comes to participant observation and immersion. So it's, since it's a method of, it says it is a method of learning, right? Method of learning means extracting out meanings, right, from your study. So, this method of learning in which we participate, right, in everyday and occasional activities of the phenomena that we want to study is participant observation. So, now a distant observation where you're just, you know, standing or maybe sitting at a farther place and just observing what all is happening in the context, in the or in the scenario, that isn't here. uh, this sort of observation talks about the researcher being present and participating well with the um, everyday activities and uh, events of the participants, right? So by participating in a phenomenon, we try to learn the meanings that the other associated with it, right? uh, Participating in the phenomenon again, when we were talking about the participant observation, we had discussed this example of Professor Nina making bheel paintings herself, so that she could understand the nuances of what goes into the paintings, and how intricately that occurs, and what meanings does that painting have for the painters who are actually artists that who are producing them. So by participating only, she clearly says in the videos that you'll see on week 5, she clearly says that she wouldn't have been able to understand the very details of those paintings if she wouldn't have done that herself. Okay, so because obviously if you give me the recipe of you give me the whole procedure of making pasta, but if I do not make it, then I wouldn't be able to understand the idea of making it and getting into the process. So only if I take up those instructions and try making things myself, only then I will be able to understand that okay, where I am facing troubles, what are the areas that are difficult to understand for me. There are various things that we have to keep in mind while we cook as well. So in that sense, uh, Professor Nina wouldn't have been able to understand what all, problems the painters face during making those paintings, unless she wouldn't like unless she uh, wouldn't have participated participated and actually been an integral part of that process of making those paintings, right? So all of these things, you get only by doing things yourself. So this is what participant observation means. And it just not only helps the researcher get the maximum a sense of the field, but also it enables research as a shared activity. Now, when we are talking like about the researching getting involved in the lives of the participants, this makes the participants a huge pillar of those of this study, right, that the researcher is conducting. They actually uh, make the participants stakeholders in the research, right? It gives them authority, it gives them power to actually manipulate what all is happening, what all will be taken away from the you know research that is being conducted. So in that sense, it's not that the researcher is on the upper hand and the participants are just there. This makes them all equal, right? This when the researcher is there doing things that the participants are doing, like for example, making if you go and start making the idols of Lord Ganesha yourself, and make your hands dirty of that mud, then you will understand that you are now at the same place as your participants. So when we say getting into their shoes, so that is what happens when you do a participant observation. So then you start losing your identity as a researcher and become a member of that particular community. It enables greater empathy and trust, right? So empathy clearly. So unless you are not you know doing things yourself, you won't be able to understand what challenges the people are facing while doing that particular activity, or making certain, like making covered or making paintings, or doing some sort of embroidery or cooking or anything like that. You won't be able to get it unless you do it, right? So that helps you relate much more with your participants. That creates a sense of empathy, right? And trust, obviously, because the participants see you as doing their work, so are they get that feeling that yes, you are not here just to ask certain questions and leave. You are here to actually understand every aspect of their lives, and then uh, you know uh, to put those things into consideration. So here uh, the power of empathy and trust proliferates. Then the participant observation finally gives you access to tacit knowledge. Tacit knowledge is basically a knowledge that cannot be articulated in words. Like, as we had given some examples that procedures can be done and they cannot be explained in words sometimes. So there's obviously this tacit knowledge is something that uh, isn't articulated. It isn't there in books. It isn't written somewhere. It's just there, which is understood from like one generation to the next, right? So and it just passes on. There's no reason, and no logic that you are trying that you will find out of things like that. But you'll see that there's this regularity when it comes to passing on of this knowledge from one person to the next. So it is embedded in practice and acquired through interaction with with the environment and through interpersonal engagements, right? So if you're not into the field and you are just trying to understand something from a YouTube video or something remote, then you will not be able to get a knowledge like that at all. If you are actually not making the mud idle on, or operating that wheel, um, then you won't be able to understand what it takes to make that idol, right? In that sense, this knowledge of making a, a mud idol, or uh, you know something which holds religious value, only comes through practice. You cannot explain how this knowledge is there and how it works. You cannot explain those things, and therefore participant observation actually gives you access to that. And otherwise you won't be, once you're not doing things, you won't be able to get the whole essence of it. So therefore any other sort of observation apart from participant observation will not give you access to tacit knowledge at all. So we'll come to standard ways of participation, degrees of participation, and areas, and then how do we record stuff and things like that later in the next problem solving session. Majorly, half of the things have been covered in this. Week, half of week 4 and half of week 5 has been covered um, uh, in this problem solving session. I would really urge you to go through all of the videos, or if you get chance to go through the text and material as well. And finally, if you have any problem, then attempt the quiz as well. And if you have like any problems, questions, please come to the problem solving session. I'm here to help you guys out with everything that you might face issues with. So uh, it actually gives us a environment to interact and get to learn better. I can learn from you, you guys can learn from me. So it gives us a proper sense of space, to be together, learn together, because otherwise just reading and going through things gives you some vague knowledge about things, and not the whole of it. And yeah, next Monday, we'll be meeting at 7 to 9 p.m. again. Until then, keep reading and keep exploring, and also keep your questions ready for the next session. It was fun explaining you guys everything. Thank you so much. Take care.